Muted. Mute means you can't speak.
Welcome to the February 1st meeting of the Rotary Club of South Jacksonville. For our Zoom members, we are happy you can join us as ever. Please remember to mute yourself and submit any questions or comments via chat, or just unmute yourself and talk. Thank you to our all of our greeters this morning. There were plenty of them. The prayer and the pledge today will be given by past President Bill Langley.
Thank you. We join with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we gather today as Rotarians and friends. We acknowledge that wherever we go, we are always in your presence, and we thank you for the gift of Rotary. We ask that you give your guidance and wisdom to our country leaders as they walk through the tensions around the world. Close the door of hate and open the door of love. Let kindness come in with every gift and good desires with every greeting. Deliver us from evil by the blessing which Christ brings. We want to lift up and thank you for our Rotary leaders, today's speaker, and especially those who need an extra special prayer. Place your comforting hand on each of them and give them peace, strength, and comfort. Thank you for the food that is before us and for the opportunity to share ideas and to serve our community. Let our service and actions be a testimony to you and a roadmap for others. Amen.
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 And I'm glad to see that Christy King is here for family time. Please welcome Christy.
Thanks, President Richard. We have one birthday this week. Jorge Morales is celebrating his birthday on February 3rd. For member anniversaries, Tyree Boyer is celebrating 21 years with Rotary, and Richard Miller is celebrating 4 years with Rotary, both on February 6th. And last but not least, we have one wedding anniversary this week. Larry Cavallero and his wife Rose they did celebrate their anniversary on January 31st.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, President Richard.
All right. Some announcements, our oratory contest update. That is coming up fast.
Yes, it is. So we had a wonderful final regional yesterday at downtown Jax. We had 4 dynamic female speakers, an all-female panel yesterday. Douglas Anderson won the competition, and a young lady from Douglas Anderson. So we are on a roll, and we've got a little over 2 weeks before our final at WJCT. I want to thank everyone who has supported the oratory competition. Several of you have stepped up to do the dinner club sponsorship, and I would just encourage you, if you haven't and are able to, if you could still support us. We're still looking for additional sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you and your committee for all your hard work. Let's see. On the announcements list is an upcoming social. And Lisa Marie, do you have anything about that? Please welcome Lisa Marie.
So February was supposed to be our night at the theater, or the movie theater. As many of you know, Parker's wife they had their first baby in January. So we're kind of rescheduling February for a social at Rue, but we haven't gotten confirmation yet from them. So I know past President Tom and I will connect on that and see about moving forward with something. Obviously, we've got a lot going on in February, so we will make sure that as soon as that date is confirmed, we'll get it up to membership. So thank you.
Excellent news. Thank you. Now, the Alhambra event. Stephen Jones called me this morning and gave me a bunch of information over the phone. And I will relay to you what I have managed to write down. I think this is all that you need to know. Ticket reservations will close at the end of the day today. If you have not already made your reservation, operators are standing by until midnight tonight. Yeah, right. If you've indicated interest, you have reserved a ticket. If you have interest but have not expressed it yet, we need your reservation today. Please contact me, Lori, or Patty again today. You will be billed for your tickets in the next billing cycle, and donations will be reflected in your next bill as well. I'm going to ask, against my better judgment, if there are any questions.
Richard?
Yes.
I don't have a question, but I have one more oratory thing.
Oh, great. Okay. Want to come up?
Just very quickly, we are asking everyone to RSVP if you intend to join us on the 17th. It's on the club calendar, and you can just go out there and RSVP, just so we have an idea of how many are attending, as Woody's is donating dinner that evening, so we want to have a pretty accurate account. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is our 50-50 drawing with Lori Whitmer. Please welcome Lori.
Right, I did not do a full count, but I think we are around $300. So if we have a winner today, they will get half of that. And I'll do a count to make sure we got the money right. So get your tickets out. Again, this raffle, we've raised a good $400 to $500 to go towards our Daniel's Kids project. And we still need some volunteers for the February 9th event, where we're going there to play kickball with the kids and get a tour of that new renovation and kind of talk about that. Number is 090460.
Oh, yes. Bring it up.
Wow. All right, shuffling on my way over. All right, thank you, everyone. The pot will be growing. Keep play till we have a winner. And again, February 9th, 3 o'clock, we're looking for 10 to 15 volunteers to come out. And you can bring spouse, older kids. That'd be good too.
Please allow me to introduce our visitors and guests. Also means I'm singing. Oh, well. Actually, our first guest is, and I want to get this right, Carmen Lamar?
Yeah.
Remote, okay.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
I say. Lisa Winslow also has a guest.
I do. I would like to introduce once again my guest, Ed Vaughn, who, if you'd like to come out for an fireside chat tonight, I think we will be hosting with him and David Walker. So,
And via Zoom today, we have another guest visiting from the downtown and West Side clubs, Jim Overton. Did I miss anybody? Well, that's too bad. Now I have to sing song. Oh, well. Let me pick a note. It'll be something on the scale. We here in Rotary welcome so glad you came.
came our way. A hand of friendship is yours, in sunshine or in rain. We here in Grove, we say welcome, come again.
And to introduce our program guest today, Charlie Cofer. Perfect timing.
Thank you, President Richard. Pleased to introduce you to Mari Kuraishi, who is the president of the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund.
Oh,
The fund's efforts to create communities of belonging for the places and institutions that Jesse Ball DuPont knew and loved, by fostering inclusive growth and reducing structural and systemic barriers to resources and opportunities. Prior to joining the fund, Mari co-founded the groundbreaking crowdfunding philanthropy site, Global Giving, with Dennis Whittle, and served as its president until 2018. Global Giving connects donors with grassroots projects around the world, providing a vetting platform for donors and training and education for nonprofits. Since 2002, Global Giving has connected more than 1 million donors to 25,000 projects in 170 countries around the world, generating more than $500 million in funding for their projects. In 2011, Mari was named one of Foreign Policy's top 100 global thinkers for crowdsourcing world saving. Prior to founding Global Giving, she worked at the World Bank, where she created and managed some of the bank's most innovative loans and programs, including founding its innovation engine, the Development Marketplace. Mari currently serves on the boards of Global Giving, DataKind, and the Cummer Museum in Jacksonville, as well as the advisory boards of the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard, the U.S.-Japan Council, and LISC Jacksonville. I ask that each of you welcome Mari to Reddit.
Especially those of you on Zoom. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and to share with you the work that we have been doing on the downtown riverfront. You heard that we at the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund care deeply about the communities that Mrs. DuPont loved, and Jacksonville is arguably one of the top places that she loved. She founded Epping Forest. That was her home. Epping Forest called such because there was an Epping Forest up in Virginia where she was born and raised. We believe firmly that communities prosper when they are as inclusive and as welcoming of diverse talent as possible, that there are many ways to solve problems, and that you do not see all those different ways until you bring all people with different viewpoints to the table. So we are in the business not just of placemaking, but of welcoming diversity and creating an environment for inclusion. And so when the city asked us to partner with them on how might we activate the downtown riverfront in as inclusive a way as possible, it was right up our alley. So I'm going to take you quite quickly through some slides to give you a sense of what we are doing, but I'm happy to come back at the end of the presentation at any particular points that you feel very strongly about. We worked with a number of experts around cultural institutions, as well as design firms, as well as consulting firms specializing in looking at funding and governance structures. And then, of course, organizations like Groundwork, who you know very well as being in charge of the Emerald Trail here in Jacksonville, as well as the Advocacy Coalition Riverfront Parks Now, which is a coalition of different nonprofits ranging from Scenic Jacks to St. John's River Keepers to other organizations that care deeply about the importance of public spaces on the riverfront. This is the boundary of our remit. As you can see on the north bank, that stretches from Memorial Park in Riverside to Metropolitan Park on the eastern edge. On the south bank, we are looking at, of course, this particular location right in front of us at the hotel, essentially comprising the Baptist Health waterfront as well as the river's edge, formerly known as the district. And what we were trying to do is figure out all the different things that people wanted to do on the riverfront and to see how we might accommodate them all. One of the things I must say is I don't think Jacksons in general know what an amazing asset the river is. There are cities that make a much bigger deal of creeks running through them. We have the majestic St. John's River that is, like, as far as I can tell, a mile wide in some certain parts. And there's only upside to making that public riverfront as accessible and as active as possible. There are many homes on the riverfront. That's an amazing amenity, but not everyone of the 1 million people who live in the county have access to the river. And so downtown's riverfront should be everybody's riverfront. So that was our big objective. This is just a timeline to give you a sense of all the activities that we undertook. We actually started earlier than what's shown here on the slide because we started talking to city council members as early as January of last year. But we engaged intensively with various stakeholders really in the spring and summer of 2021. Who were those stakeholders? These are some of the faces. I'm not going to go through them all. This is a task force, sort of senior leaders in the community and stakeholders who could sort of, make decisions that could advance our work. We also brought together a next gen group because, as you saw in the last slide, the people who are sort of in charge tend to be older, and the riverfront's going to be here 20, 30 years from now when these people will be in charge. So this is a next gen group that we brought together, as well as a large activation coalition, basically organizations that we could partner with in activating the river, and the cultural institutions like Mosh and the Comer, but also institutions like the Y, WJCT. We tried to make sure that we were as inclusive as we could be in thinking about activation. This is a summary of the number of engagements we had. So we surveyed over 3,000 people. We had 6 public programs in real life. These were water taxi tours. These were twilight walks along the river, community meetings, 2 public meetings that because of COVID had to be virtual, but maybe because of COVID had extensive uptake. I opened my Zoom screen on one of those days and ended up with 200 people on a webinar. And multiple community meetings, probably more than 5. I personally went to many more church basins than I had ever been to, joined town hall meetings held by city council members, really got to meet a lot of different people. And I think, there are many findings from that process. And we've just pulled out 2 out of these sort of 10 high-level findings that we came up with. And by the way, these slides are all available on our website, dupontfund.org. So if you ever want to go back and see exactly what I skipped over, they'll all be there. I want to just highlight the river is the star of the show. It's what I meant by saying, other cities will make a big deal of a creek. We don't make enough of a big deal about the St. Charles River. One startling statistic that came through in the survey, you saw we talked to over 3,000 people. Of the 3,000 people, who the vast majority of them said they wanted to spend time at the river, 1 in 3 do not go to the river. That's shocking. 1 in 3 don't want to, but do not go to the river. Only 1 in 5 regularly spend time on the river. And that means, regularly jog on the river walk, regularly walk their dogs, regularly boat on the river. All of those things count as actually spending time on the river. So again, we have a population that really wants to spend more time on the river and for a variety of reasons does not. Whether it is because it's difficult to access, whether it is because there's not enough to do on the river. It's a trade-off. You can either go to the river or have dinner. If you can't have dinner on the river, right? So competing demands, and there you are. 1 in 3 people don't make it to the river. Which brings me to my next point, that people want to have fun, but also they want function, right? They want to be able to integrate the river into their daily lives. For that, you need function. You can't just always show up when there's a concert there. I mean, that's fun. And I want to encourage you all to, River Jams is restarting in 2022. There's a great lineup. Stay tuned for the musicians who will be coming to River Jams. And I hope some of you went last year. There were over 10,000 people at some of those concerts. So obviously when there's a draw, people show up. But can we find ways to make the river functional for people as well? I'm going to skip to the Esplanade plan. You may have seen drawings. This showed up in media sometime in early summer last year because the DIA asked us to front load the design of the shipyards area. This is a far eastern end of the North Bank in that original map that I showed you. They asked us to speed it up because Iguana Investments, aka the Jags, wanted to get disposition for the 4-star hotel that they want to build there. And they also asked us to speed it up because MOSH, the Museum of Science and History, wanted to move from the South Bank to the North Bank, and they are part of this parcel. We needed to help DIA figure this out because the kids' campus, which is where the 4-star hotel will go, was public land. It was a park. And we needed to compensate for taking that public park and handing it over to private investors by repurposing some of the other land that the city owned to make sure that the Florida Department of Environmental Protection was okay with us maintaining the same number of acres if it's slightly different configuration. And we put together this conceptual plan because inevitably the development of the space is going to take place in stages. And as the stages sort of roll through, we wanted there to be an integrated vision for what this space could be. It comprises 48 acres. That's a lot of land. This could become an amazing signature park. And it could lead to the revitalization of Metropolitan Park, who, as I understand it from some of you, used to be an incredibly active place and could be again, especially with the Four Seasons and all of the other things planned for that area. So that's out there. I think the RFP for the western end has already been announced, and there are firms competing for that. So this is one of the outcomes from the engagement process. The other outcomes are that we came up with 10 principles, social and cultural principles, as well as design principles that we hope will inform future considerations about how the waterfront is going to be used. So when those proposals come back from the RFP, we want the city to be able to use these 10 principles, 5 social cultural, 5 design principles, to be able to evaluate, does the proposal meet the needs of the community as they were expressed through this engagement process. Frankly, I hope that the citizens will use these 10 principles as well. to say, hey, this does or does not meet our needs. Switching gears to some benchmark research that was carried out by Riverfront Parks Now. We asked Riverfront Parks Now to look at comparable cities. And here are just a handful, but they looked at many comparable cities. I don't know how many of you have been to Louisville, Kentucky recently, but there is a beautiful, beautiful park on the river, and that's the bridge over to Indiana. It is activated and gets 1.5 million visitors a year to that space. And like Jacksonville, it does not have a lot of residents downtown. Louisville's resident count downtown is 4,000. So we are already above that number here in Jacksonville. I know that, you know, we all aspire to get to 10,000 and beyond, but this is an example of a city that has done this in the context of 4,000 residents downtown. Another great city to look at is Cincinnati, because this park is centered around the stadium. So there's a lot of pre and post game events that activates this park. There's mixed use residential and shopping, and it's active 24 hours a day. Others you may be even more familiar with, this is Tampa, our sister city. $1 billion in private investment generated in downtown Tampa after the creation of this river walk. St. Petersburg, 1 million visitors a year, but also very active in public education. Lots of students come down here for school trips to engage with ecological issues. So those were the benchmarks. And then I'm going to shift gears to the economic case for riverfront activation. Why should we do this, right? Simply put, capital follows people, people follows place, and the place needs investment. We do a lot of work in Jacksonville attracting companies to Jacksonville, and that's really important. But increasingly, people are choosing where to live independent of where the companies are located. And this hybrid environment that we are all operating in has only accelerated that trend. And young people especially are looking for places that offer dense urban context, but also have cool public spaces, whether it's biking trails or public parks, amenities that we are, you know, I think we've got some upside to grow into. And you can see that because you will see that some of the cities, other benchmark cities that we looked at, for instance, Pittsburgh over there on the far left, $130 million in public investment generated $2.6 billion in private investment. Amazing leverage. Denver, Confluence Park, outdoor recreation saved park users $65 million in healthcare costs because they were out there being active. And lifestyle choices have a great deal to do with how healthy you are. Finally, the Chattanooga waterfront, they credit the funding that they dedicated to the Riverfront Innovation District to being able to attract Volkswagen to their city. And I know from anecdotal evidence that not just Volkswagen, but they told cities, hey, if we're going to put major senior executives from our companies in a place like Greenville or a place like Chattanooga, there's got to be a downtown. There's got to be a cultural scene. There's got to be walkability. All of these things matter to our senior executives. And so they need those attractors to even consider a city for foreign direct investment. Another example is the 11th Street Bridge. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 30 years. Anacostia was, I mean, there are bridges across the rivers, but Anacostia, the traditionally African-American part of D.C., was not very well integrated into the economic and political life of Washington, D.C. proper, right across the river. This 11th Street Bridge, by creating a meeting place, a place where those two worlds collide and meet and understand each other, really created more than a physical bridge between these two communities. So now is the time for Jacksonville to be really serious about public investment. As you can see, population growth of US metropolitan areas was 3.7% average across the country, 7.7 in Florida, and we were at 10.1%. And this is stats from 2021, which is to say there were stats from 2020. As you have no doubt seen, the real estate market here is extremely hot. That's evidence that that number, if you measured it today, is probably higher. Compared to other cities in Florida and the southern US, Jacksonville has a lot of areas where it can better compete. Let me show you a matrix of Jacksonville, Tampa, Tallahassee, Charleston, and Savannah. As you can see, we're doing okay, but there's room to grow. You know, we could attract more college degree holders who are new residents. We could get more innovation as measured by the rate of patent registration from our city. These are all opportunities for growth. Now, why downtown? Why not St. John's Center? Why not the beaches? Because it's one of the most strategic locations. The downtown area is 25 times more dense than any other part of the county. Downtown is 0.3% of the landmass area, but generates 13% of total GDP for the city. There is no better place for public investment to be made. Fortunately, the city actually owns a lot of the land on the riverfront and therefore can make decisions about allocating some of these pieces of land to the public so that we can create good, smartly designed public investments that enhance private investment. If we do this right, the private investors will only find the private lots that are up for development more attractive. Looking ahead, you can see biggest gains in 2020 net arrivals. We were top. Hottest housing market, we're number 2. So the time is now. We cannot wait. We've got to make some decisions now. If we fail to make the decisions, people will start saying, maybe. In 2021, I saw us make a listicle in Outside Magazine, and we made it on Outside Magazine's list of cities to watch because on the strength of the Emerald Trail. That's what attracted Outside Magazine's attention to us. And that magazine is read by, as you might imagine, smart young people, active, you know, the kind of people you want coming to your city. So, moving on to funding, how do we fund all this? Because, of course, this all takes money. We believe that there's a way to go about this with public-private partnerships. If the public sector invests upfront, then we will start the flywheel for private investment to happen. And it only happens if private philanthropy, like ourselves, or corporations we may be working for, find it in their interest to ally their brand with what is happening on the waterfront. So it's got to be high quality, it's got to be attractive, it's got to be inclusive. If it works out right, there are other cities that have done this pattern of high upfront public investment followed by private funding flowing to the effort. And lest you think, well, all the bills are paid up front, they're not. Capital, yes, capital investment is necessary up front to build these things, but it is critical to make sure that there's money for maintenance and that there's money for activation, because we actually have lots of beautiful parks that are underused, and it's because we don't activate them as well as we might. Some examples of how this is done. I don't know how many of you are, this being something, I don't know how many of you make it to the Riverside Arts Market, but that's there every week. And they generate 75% of their upkeep through user fees and, you know, other revenue that they earn by holding Riverfront Arts Market. In Minneapolis, concessions and user fees net 25% or so of the cost of upkeep, and that represented $11 million in 2020. Other examples in Orlando, also our own Jacksonville Zoo, Millennium Park in Chicago, again, privately seeded endowment income represents 42% of the total operating cost of Millennium Park, which is a big fancy park. Real estate value capture in Philadelphia. You can see that a lot of the property assessments and the tax revenues that are associated with that feed into the maintenance of the bid. Ditto for the Rose Kennedy Greenway in Boston, Massachusetts. There are also a lot of federal and state grants available, especially now. Not just with the federal infrastructure bill, but you probably saw that the Florida state budget has some, it's been a good year. So there are a lot of grants available, and we should get on top of applying for as many of them as possible. Even a place like Myrtle Beach has gotten, grants from the Knight Foundation. I mean, we can do that. An activated riverfront is one of the biggest economic, social, and cultural assets that we could bring. So I'm going to switch gears and what next, right? So we talked to a lot of people about what they want to do at the river. This is a summary of what they want to do. They range from just sports to arts and culture to commercial and retail. And again, here in the activation, we think that the key is leveraging partnership and making sure that the community owns. So how do you do that, right? Well, we could establish some themes that allow people to sort of merge in the broader stream of what is happening on the riverfront. These are extremely vague: dreams, bridges, roots. They could be anything, right? They could be root vegetables. They could be your ancestors. Lots of different things that you could imagine in something like that. 2022, we could say it's a bicentennial. We can make the bicentennial 200 years. We could also designate certain days as being about health, or certain days about being about music, so that if you are a yoga teacher and you want to do classes on the riverfront and you get, permission from Parks and Rec to do a yoga class on the riverfront, you pick the day that is relevant to health or exercise, right? You try to find a way in which people start knowing what to do when you go down to the riverfront on a Tuesday. This is what you can expect. Or you go down to the riverfront on a Friday. This is what you can expect. Again, need to find a way to integrate into people's daily patterns. These are all, you cannot read them, especially there in the back, I'm sure, but these are all the interventions that we came up with after talking to various people about how we might activate the riverfront. But I'll show you, this should be more visible, some specific ideas. One is a mobile unit that can be repurposed for many things. It can be a basketball hoop when it's closed, but when it's opened up, it could be a instruction space, or it can be a performance space. Another idea is something like a temporary installation of lights on the river. This is the kind of stuff that is Instagram catnip. So this should attract, again, a younger demographic to the riverfront. Go out on a date, walk along the river, snap pictures of yourself against these water lights. And then they can be moved, right? We can experiment with trying this in Brooklyn, trying this on South Bank, etc. So these are some of the things that we at the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund hope to partner with the city to actually try out in 2022, in part because I feel a personal responsibility to the thousands of people we solicited input for. I don't know how many of you fill out surveys and respond to calls for what do you want to do. You duly, fill out the form, and then you never hear it again. You never hear back. You're like, oh, well, there goes 10 minutes of my life. I want to do right by all these people who give us their time and their thoughts and their dreams and their passions. So we want to try and make sure that for all those people who engage, they see something happening in 2022. So the city has agreed that we will not try to concentrate on one neighborhood. We will pick various nodes along the river and try out, one or two interventions in all the different nodes. So this notionally represents some of the nodes that we can focus on. This might be a little bit better for you to understand because these are distinct neighborhoods, as it were. And those are some of the places that we hope to do activations. Just a couple of renderings to show you what this might look like. You all are familiar with the Statue of the Mariner. What might this look like when it's activated? If we put out temporary seating, if we put up some shade so that it's not, especially in the summer, it's actually usable in the heat of the day. Can we paint wayfinding patterns on the sidewalk? I don't know how many of you done the Patriot Trail in Boston, but you don't need a guidebook. You can just follow the paint and you can go see Paul Revere's house, right? It makes it dead simple. And you could just join the trail or not join the trail. You don't have to do the whole thing. You could just do a little bit. We want to lower the cost of a riverfront experience for people by making it dead easy for people to experience as little or as much of the waterfront as we might hope. I'm going to stop here. I've talked long enough, so would be happy to answer any questions.
What are some of the obstacles you're running across and being able to move forward with what you are working on?
So the question for the Zoom people is, what are some of the obstacles that we've run into? Well, so far we haven't run into any obstacles in the process that we undertook last year, which was engaging with the public and making sure that we could extract what was doable on the river. I think the next stage, I think there are question marks about, how do we set up how might we organize funding so that, this stuff is going to be still experimental. Like some of these things may or may not work with people. We need to make sure we're only undertaking the things that people respond to. We may discover that those water lights, short out. I don't know. There are things we have to actually test. Once we have tested them and there is consensus that this will be a cool thing to have, then we need to figure out how to fund it. We need to figure out how to fund the capital costs and how to fund the maintenance costs. And as many of you are aware, public sector financing is complicated. It's strictly segregated into recurrent and capital costs, and you have to know which pot to tap into. You need to make sure you have all the right permissions. You need to make sure that there is enough maintenance resources set aside. So all of those things require also not just funding, but a governance structure. If we go down the path of public-private partnership, we need to have a way in which the public and the private sectors come together and agree, because if they all kind of do their own thing, it's just going to be a mishmash. So a governance structure by which we get public input, get private contributions, and move forward in the same. So I think the broadly speaking, it's going to be around finance and governance. Yeah.
We have an occasional visitor from Chicago, particularly when the Jaguars are playing a home game here. I think everybody's familiar with the fact that Mr. Khan has extremely deep pockets. My question to you is, how would you characterize his interest in all of this, other than just the things that he wants to do right around the stadium?
Well, I've only glancingly met Mr. Khan. I've talked a lot to Mark Lamping, who is the president. And I know Mark is deeply committed to making sure that Metropolitan Park, for instance, is well funded, and they've made a 5-year commitment to the maintenance and activation of Metropolitan Park. I found Mark open to discussions around areas that are outside of that shipyards area. He has made contributions to programs in La Villa, in other parts of downtown. So I think the potential is there for greater engagement, but we need to make a intentional and concerted effort to keep their attention on the broader picture, because when you're building a major thing, it's very easy for your focus to get really narrow. And we think there's a lot more than that. After all, this is this vision is of signature parks, not just one signature park, but multiple signature parks connected by a river walk. And to make it worthwhile for people to come downtown and spend time downtown, we need there to be enough of a thing. They can't just come to the hotel, right? And only certain people could come to the hotel. It's prohibitively expensive to, get a drink at a 4-star hotel. We need to make sure that there are multiple options, including you can bring your own food and have a picnic. So
I love visiting Chicago because the lakefront has that uninterrupted strip.
yeah,
People living downtown. You go there in the spring and it's just packed with people. So much of the emphasis on our town waterfront is development, buildings. And it's not a real deep green space now. Are we able to develop on the green space, but still leave enough green space right along the river?
so the question, in case the Zoom folks couldn't hear it, is can we strike the right balance between green space on the river and also allowing, a more expansive feel a la Chicago and the lakefront that some of you may be familiar with. So the publicly owned land can be put towards park space, and it's not just the shipyards area. There's obviously the Riverfront Plaza. You may have seen the renderings for the Riverfront Plaza where Perkins and Will be developing the public land there. And then there's Liberty Marina and all of these different developments. Do they go in as far as the Chicago green space? Not exactly, but I think we can strike a really good balance by ensuring that there are view lines of sight into those public spaces from several blocks away inland, so that we invite people into those public spaces. We're a smaller city than Chicago, so we may not need as expansive public spaces. But again, I think making sure that there are, accessibility in all its forms. It's not just, is there enough parking downtown? It is, can you get to the downtown riverfront if you are in a wheelchair? If you can't, navigate the sidewalks to the riverfront, well, you're not going to get there, right? Do we make it possible for children to show up? For parents to show up with their children, because if you have young children, they get bored really easily with walking along the river. They want a park, children's park with toys and things that they can play with. So again, we need to keep in mind, what does it take to attract people downtown? So I hand it back there.
One of the things that interested me before I moved here, just with so much water, and as you said at the very beginning, wow, when I was looking at Jackson, I was like, there's so much water, like any city would kill to have this much access. And I've been here now for 20 years, and I've always wanted like a restaurant district downstairs, and not a sporadic restaurant, because that doesn't work. You need to have a group of restaurants together so that when I go, if this one happens to be on the wait, I have other choices to go to. But as I see it on the river development, if I'm opening a restaurant on the river, unless I've got a chain or deep pockets, it's a chicken and egg kind of thing. We need to build the district. So we need the city to help the restaurants and the smaller, not necessarily pop and pop type restaurants, but the local restaurants, to bridge that gap from we get it, we open, it's going to take a year, 2 years, for people to get in the habit of, okay, there's 6 restaurants down. Let's go to the restaurant district and find where we're going to eat. Is the city prepared to help that in that way? Or I guess, is there a group like yourself that?
I think the
Prepared to
city
help.
remains committed to helping business owners, make the investments that they want to see made in downtown. And you're right that, you need businesses aggregate because actually they support each other more than they compete with each other. If you've ever wondered why there's so many rug stores in one place, it's because, as you say, you don't find the rug you want. You want to be able to go to the next rug store and find the one you really want, right? Same with restaurants. You may say, I want to go to this restaurant, but there's a wait and you want to just move on. That can be accomplished not exclusively at the riverfront, right? So the riverfront plaza, the formerly Atlantic, there are plans for multiple eateries in that space, but just behind, of course, is Estrella Cochina. There is Bread and Board. So offering options that cluster, Bellwether is there too. Cowford is not that far away. Beginning to create a dense enough area where people have choices is really important. And I think the city is trying to be quite intentional about supporting a group of businesses that can, it's critical mass to invite people from the beach or St. John's Town Center to this.
I think this is a great initiative. I love going downtown. I think we have a beautiful city, and I wish more people would see it. And actually went down 2 weeks ago and to exercise and caught the tail end of the sip and stroll. Do you have any initial feedback on how that's going? Is it drawing people in, or just bringing people that are right there?
I don't know. I haven't talked to Jake about the stats for sip and stroll. The question was about, how is sip and stroll going on the South Bank? Some of it is dependent on weather, right? If it's too cold, people won't show up for sip and stroll. But I think the initial feedback that I heard from Jake is that it's very promising and that it is, whether it is attracting people who would not otherwise be on the South River Bank, I don't know, because I'm not sure they are surveying enough people to say, are you always here anyway? And did we just happen to give you a drink? Or did you come here so that you could have a drink and run, walk along the water? So that may be something to ask Jake to start surveying to figure out, are we in fact drawing people?
I kind of applaud your work. I've been following it. I think you're doing a great job. My wife and I have been very interested in the work that's going on. I'm a naval architect, and my company for 30 years now has designed passenger vessels for cities all over the United States. And I always find the one thing I miss about Jacksonville is we can get to the river and see it somewhat, but we can't get out on it unless we have private vessels.
Yeah.
Somebody's personal boat or something like that. If you haven't seen the city from the river, it's amazing. So I would ask in your considerations, your thought process, if you can think about one more step, and that is actually getting people onto the river itself.
Yeah.
I think would be plenty of interest commercially from a number of companies that are nationally based or even locally based in Florida and Georgia. But I think we can get even more interest of people out there seeing things. We've talked about Chicago and New York and all these other cities that have great waterfronts. And I think that is an interesting aspect of it, that you can actually get out onto the water too and see things and see the city from that viewpoint, which is a wonderful angle to see it from too.
Yeah, so a question from the naval architect in the room about how we might actually get people on the water instead of just to the water. And obviously there is a water taxi company. I think they're suffering from lack of demand. So we need to generate the demand for them to stay in business and keep the concession that they have, which I think is important. We are looking at, in the McCoy's Creek area, kayak rentals. The challenge with downtown is, if you've ever looked at a map of the river, it narrows dramatically as you approach the downtown area, and there's almost like an oxbow switch, right? And so the current, as you say, is quite swift in downtown. So for all but the most skilled kayakers, it's not necessarily all that safe. The idea in McCoy's Creek is to sort of cut off with buoys the safe part of the inlet, so people can kayak paddle around, as it were, but still get that sort of water to land view, which I think is spectacular, and is something that every Jackson should experience at least once. What does our city look like from the river? There's also, obviously, where do you park, right? So marinas are a big thing. That's great if you have a boat and want to park it. But the question of better public access for those of us who don't own boats is absolutely on the city's mind.
We could listen to you indefinitely,
Okay.
but since it's time to close, I would like to thank you and also give you this certificate, which will tell you a little bit about a donation that we have made in your name to the Rotary Foundation
Thank you.
for the eradication of polio.
Polio.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. Some reminders, next week our speaker will be Dr. Tim Conway, president of the Morris Center Clinic. As we end our meeting, our membership reminder is each one bring one, and our Rotary motto, in which I hope you'll join me, service above self, one profits most who serve the best.